Showtime! The Capital G show starts right now.
What's up YouTube, Capital G here. So we're talking Unfairnity in this video, and we're asking the simple question, right now, without considering the Duelist Alliance, is Unfairnity the best deck of the format? And I know a lot of people out there probably thinking, you're just making this video because it won Worlds, and no, I actually had planned on making this video for over a week, but personally, I think the answer is yes. And even if you throw Worlds just out the window, you totally disregard it because, you know, there's only 23 people and they've got a made-up ban list that's only in play for like 2 days that, you know, is never really relevant again. Infernity did get second place at UK Nationals. It got sixth place at the North American Nationals, which Sahabi obviously turned into first place at Worlds. And then it won one of the Japanese Nationals too, so it's like the deck has clearly been doing its thing on the biggest stages, and I think that, you know, some of that has to do with the fact that Exiton Knight gave the deck an incredibly easy answer to the whole set 5 back row nonsense that a lot of decks use as a strategy to win, and the deck kind of would struggle with that before if you just walled up with a whole bunch of defenses. Infernity was just like, well damn, we can't fight through all of that unless we have like the perfect storm of a whole bunch of back row removal plus a way to special summon our Archfiend. With that being said, I think that we can all agree that the biggest reason that the deck is so good right now is because Soul Charge basically took the deck back to when Launcher was at 3. And oddly enough, Jerome McHale made an excellent point about Infernity during the World stream, and it's something that I hadn't really thought about, but right now I think that it's the sole reason why it's the best deck currently. He said that Infernity doesn't care about the mid and late game. It basically wants to go off, it wants to search out all of its power traps, and then it wants to use those power traps to simplify the game, and then it just wins. And it's crazy because it's kind of a playstyle that solely belongs to this deck right now. I mean, you could think of other decks that tried to work this way, but they were generally bad and inconsistent FTKs like Exodia and stuff like that. I mean, you just weren't going to have that deck work during an 8 or 9 round event. It just wasn't going to happen. And I think that with the new rule change, Infernity actually got better because we've seen that the deck can routinely take an opening hand of 5 cards and convert that into anywhere upwards of 11 cards. So obviously going second and getting that extra card, you know, giving you 6 cards means nothing because you've already started the game -5 if you can wrap your head around that. Or the deck can go second and now it has more resources. You know, it has the fact that you have less defense and it can attack. So it's kind of the same situation as I mentioned with Heretics. Going second with Infernity actually isn't that bad. Unless you have Murmillo where you have that extra defensive option and you're still at 6 cards. Everything that I've said basically favors the Infernity player when they're going second. And then, of course, you know, it can OTK, so, you know, ask the second place dude at Worlds if you don't believe me. I would say that this deck, in 2 ways, it kind of reminds me of Dragon Rulers when they first came out. I know some people are like, oh, that's crazy. I'm not saying that Infernity right now is as good. There are just a couple of things that remind me of the Dragon Ruler deck. First is its ability to fight through back row. You know, Dragon Rulers, they had this way of fighting through back row where they would just summon their big ass dragons. They didn't even care if the dragons died because they knew that they needed to get rid of the back row at some point. And while they were banishing the dragons to summon the dragons, they were just getting replacements for the cards anyway. So at some point your defense was going to crack. This deck kind of does the same thing. If you commit to the board heavy, it just keeps trying to summon Exiton Knight to, you know, basically get rid of your back row. And I would say the second thing is the deck's willingness to go crazy neg and spend so much of its resources in its first turn. Remember how Dragon Rulers used to discard like crazy during their opening turn? I mean, they would discard a whole bunch of cards for the babies, or they would discard for Tempest's effect. Basically, it just build up their graveyard so that they could use that kind of as an infinite resource throughout the duel, and then they would just flip over Super Rejuvenation and draw like 6 cards, and it'd be like, damn, they just recovered completely. Infernity does kind of the same thing. Like, it uses all of its resources, mainly its monsters, for constant Xyz attempts, whether that be, you know, like Exiton Knight or Lavalval Chain. And then, if you use back row on those cards or you don't, the deck is like, well, we don't really care because we're just going to soul charge everything back. So even if you use removal on our cards, it's like we're getting them all back anyway. And the deck is fine taking these heavy losses early because it knows that when it really starts going off, that Archfiend is just going to get it cards over and over and over and over again. And every time they use Archfiend, they go +1. And, after going like Archfiend 5 times in a duel or 5 times in a turn, and basically they've recovered everything that they want so that, they're ahead of you or they're equal to you, but they have better cards than you generally do. So I think that, you look at the deck and it literally erases the mid and late game. It's just like, yeah, we're not going to play that. We're going to make sure that this game is decided in the first 2 turns, and that's how we roll. I think that it's the best deck by a very small margin. Obviously, I think that that can change. And I thought that Shadows would be one of those decks that just completely shuts down Infernity because, realistically, I think Midrash is going to be a problem for them. Outside of like Book of Moon, they really don't have a lot of ways to answer it. But then I thought about it, it's like, how many times are you going to open with a first turn Midrash? Realistically, if you don't have Fusion, you can't even do Midrash turn 1. So, I don't know if you're going to always open with first turn Midrash. So, Infernity is definitely going to be a tier 1 deck for the rest of this format, in my opinion. Want to know you guys' thoughts. Do you think Infernity is the best deck? Do you think that it is a fair deck? And, thank you very much for watching this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Click the thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And of course, check out my Kickstarter. Ends in 1 day. Subscribing makes life happy.